much. We are going to be talking now about digital advertising for all, unlocking untapped opportunities. We're going to be hearing from Rabin Yaghoubi, who is Chief Corporate Development Officer for the Aleph Group, and he's responsible for leading new business and corporate development, M&A activity, and operational integration globally. He's going to be speaking to an expert called Rosa Markarian, and she brings over 15 years of extensive expertise across the entire digital advertising spectrum. It's going to be a very exciting conversation, and I'd like to introduce them now, both on stage. Please welcome Rosa Markarian and Rabin Yaghoubi.
What a beautiful journey through the whole world. Und nun, willkommen in Köln. Schön, dass du da bist, Rabin. Dankeschön.
Dankeschön. Vielen Dank. Freue mich sehr, hier zu sein. Ich komme ja ursprünglich aus Hamburg, bin waschechter Hamburger Jung, but I think we're going to do this in English. Correct?
Yes,
okay,
looking
great.
forward to it.
But, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much for having me and welcoming Aleph to this amazing event.
Great. In the preparation for this talk, I came across a few very astonishing facts about Aleph. I mean, you started as a unicorn startup in Argentina. Now you are present in more than 130 countries. Some of your investors are Snap, X, Twitter, Sony Pictures. So tell us a little bit more about the growth story of Aleph and what your mission is today.
Sure. So maybe I'll start with the mission. To make digital advertising accessible for all. What does that actually mean? So Aleph, we operate exclusively in markets that often are referred to as emerging markets. We refer to them as underserved markets with very high growth potential that as a result have huge untapped opportunities for both media sellers and media buyers. And we sit sort of smack in the middle of those. So on the one side we have all of the major platforms, over 45 of them, for whom we monetize their audiences in over 130 of these countries. And that's really a who's who of all the major internet players. Google, Meta, X, formerly known as Twitter, Snap, Spotify, TikTok, Reddit, Pinterest, Microsoft, and also Uber, who just launched an advertising platform themselves. And for them, we build dedicated teams in the market. We do all the market education, so a lot of these platforms have their own proprietary propositions, formats, and that requires quite a lot of hand-holding with advertisers. We provide technologies for some of our platforms, so we have a proprietary technology called Wise Blue, which enables enhanced campaign management and optimization on platforms like X, and now also on Reddit. And finally, we do payments, which really means taking care of all the complexities that come with billing clients, collecting the money, and then being able to manage taxes, currencies, and be able to transfer all that in one currency to our partners through cross-border payments. On the media buyer side, we work with over 22,000 advertisers and agencies across all those 130 markets. So that spans the big six, regional agencies, local agencies. Because we represent so many different platforms, like Spotify and Snap tend to be more brand-focused. Google, Meta, Microsoft, more performance, where we cover the breadth of that, brand and performance advertisers. We go all the segments, AAA advertisers, so the very large enterprise clients, torso clients, as well as recently we launched our platform starting in Nigeria called Aleph Express for the SMB segment, so we cover all that. And finally, we do what we call import and export. So we both allow, let's say if you're a Lithuanian advertiser wanting to reach people in Lithuania, you can do that through us. But if you're an app developer in Lithuania, you want to reach people in the US or in the UK, you can do that through us as well. So, we are now, so the company started in about 2005 by an Argentinian entrepreneur called Gaston Taratuta, based out of Miami, who did this for Latin America. And then in the meantime, there were also a lot of companies entrepreneurs who started similar models, and many people here might be familiar with HTT Pool out of Central and Eastern Europe and APAC, Connect Ads was in the Middle East and North Africa, Genart in Turkey, at Dynamo Sub-Saharan Africa. And over time, we rolled all those companies out, and now we are one integrated company under the brand Aleph. We have almost 1,600 people in 60 offices, covering 130 different markets, as I said. And today, we transact more than $2 billion in total advertising volume across those markets, which makes us by far the largest player in this sector.
Yeah, wow, that's impressive. You have a very broad offering, but you really focus on the untapped opportunity that lies within emerging markets. And that is a very unique proposition in the market. I mean, it's something that many global advertising businesses don't have really on the radar. So what are the benefits that lie within going into emerging markets and building up businesses there, running campaigns there?
So first of all, there's just a massive scale in those markets. You know, I think a lot of the companies that we work with, and probably a lot of companies in this audience, they focus on maybe 10, 30 markets, some even less. And while those are, you know, money-wise the bigger markets, population-wise they represent maybe 1 billion people. And there's the rest of the world, there's another 7 billion people out there that remain untapped, right? In terms of overall GDP, those countries, as a result, you know, in aggregate, probably make up as much or comparatively as much as the 20, 30 markets that the US. So in terms of sheer scale, there's already a massive opportunity there. Secondly, it's the growth trajectory of that part of the world, or those parts of the world, those regions in the world, I should say. And you know, we're in a very cyclical business and in the advertising business, but underlying that is really a fundamental shift from offline to online, correct? And that's why consistently the percentage of digital advertising as a part of all advertising has been increasing in all of these markets across the world. And in the 130 countries I mentioned, you see exactly the same trend. You see exactly the shift from offline to online. It's only happening off a smaller base. So for example, you know, while mobile penetration there is maybe 60% and here's 90%, that's a gap that's being closed. Where the proportion of digital advertising in some of our markets is 30%, and in other markets it's 50 or 60%, the rate at which it is growing is sometimes 2 times faster, right? So this trajectory of having, you know, a huge scale and an enormous amount of growth means that companies can focus on their core markets, but if they're not in some way addressing parts of the world that in 20, 30 years will make up some of the biggest economies, Indonesia, Pakistan, Brazil, Nigeria, and the list goes on, they're leaving a lot of money and a lot of opportunity on the table. Now, this is not just one homogeneous group of countries. This is a very complex, heterogeneous set of regions, and therefore, there's a lot of complexity involved in doing so, but I think that ignoring that part of the world, you do at your own peril in the long term.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, we can imagine that there is a lot of potential, a lot of opportunities, especially in the future. But on the other hand, so what are the typical challenges that advertising and ad tech businesses face when they want to expand in those emerging markets?
I mean, there's a set of, I'll just pick out a few, or I'll give you a few. The first that we see a lot with our platforms, and maybe a lot of the people in the audience and their companies feel the same, is simply focus, right? There's only so much you can do. There's a famous US VC that had a quote that the main thing is to make the main thing the main thing. It's like to really focus on your core business and make that work, which is a very good strategy to have, right? And coming into all the markets with all their complexities, it requires investment, it requires attention, and that might dilute from the focus. So a lot of companies to choose to stay focused and therefore do not invest in these other markets because there's too much complexity. Where does that complexity come from? Very clearly, if you're working across 130 countries, you have different cultures, different languages, different customs, different currencies, different ways of doing things. They're very fragmented, and you can't just come in with one size fits all, right? You can't just take the US approach or the German approach or the British approach. You have to adapt to all these markets, okay? Which gives you the third problem. How do you adapt to these markets? You need the right people. You know, you can't just parachute someone from Germany into Indonesia or someone from the US into Brazil. You need local talent that has local relationships and that knows how to operate at a local level, right? And the fourth point is back to this idea of payments. The idea of actually making money and getting your money out is incredibly complex across all these markets. And that scares off a lot of people because you're working with different taxes, you're with different regulations, there's different modes of payment, there's different customs of how you bill, credit worthiness of clients. And so there's just a lot of complexity involved. And so what we do at Aleph is essentially we help our clients focus on their core business, but at the same time access all these opportunities by eliminating the complexity and the investment necessary and the risk necessary to do so.
I would like to dive a little bit deeper into this one very foundational challenge of payments, because I know from my own experience, if you run a campaign, let's say across 50 different markets, as you said, each with its own currencies and languages, it becomes really a headache. I can almost see the piles of invoices as endless spreadsheets, bad memories. Let's not go there, but you have now launched a new product, Aleph Payments, to tackle exactly these challenges. How does it exactly work, and how do you simplify the payment process for advertisers?
So Aleph Payments, which we're launching officially at Mexico, is one of those beautiful products that you have been building for 20 years, not even realizing how powerful it is, and because you were building it as part of a bigger stack, and at some point you realize that almost as a side effect, you built a proposition that as standalone is incredibly valuable to customers. So here's how it's sold. I'll give you an example. So we've been working with X, to some of you maybe still Twitter, X for over 10 years across 70 markets in 47 currencies and with thousands of clients a year, right? And so we generate thousands of invoices for them. And at the end of the day, all that X wants from us is we want one payment in one currency to this one place. Could be Dublin, could be the US, could be the UK, wherever is right. So to go from thousands of invoices in 47 currencies and to address the local tax, whether it's sales, whether it's advertising specific regulations in all those markets, and then be able to pay that or remit that money back to the partner, which can be very expensive if you're doing it wrong, is an incredibly complex undertaking. We've spent 20 years perfecting that. And at some point we realized there's a lot of clients and a lot of potential partners and a lot of businesses, not necessarily media sellers, but also ad tech businesses and martech businesses that have their own salespeople in these markets, but they don't want to deal with the complexities of everything I just described. The complexities of having to ensure that your prospective client can pay, so knowing your customer, giving them credit underwriting their credit, which is necessary for many platforms. Then also invoice them, collect the payments, which can be very challenging. Then make sure that all the local taxes are taken care of. Make sure that when you're dealing with all these currencies and you're paying someone in dollars or in euros, you have to manage all the currency fluctuations and all the FX risk that comes with that. And finally, being able to pay them in that currency from all these different markets, which, like I said, there's some markets where when remitting money out can incur huge withholding taxes. And there's ways to avoid that in a very legitimate way. So what we've done is we've taken this payments infrastructure and now have a standalone business called Aleph Payments that we make available to businesses that have their own sales teams, but do not want to deal with the headache and the complexities that come with essentially the plumbing, like that very difficult piece of the business.
Okay, so that's what you have solved over the last 20 years. Now let's look a bit more in the future. Your mission is digital advertising for all, and as part of that, you say you work on democratizing digital advertising. So democratizing digital advertising, what does that mean to you, and what impact does that have, just beyond your business on the economies in the markets that you operate in?
So I'll give you two examples. One is education, one is SMB. So in education, so anytime we launch a new platform in a market, say we just launched Microsoft in Central Europe, or we launched Uber in India, we need to hire and train people on those platforms, because those are very specific advertising platforms, and people, they're not generic, they have very specific formats and propositions. And in doing so, we realized, well, what if we just opened up our training platforms to anyone? What if anyone could access training and accreditation and certification on any of these large social and search media platforms, all of whom we represent? So we built a platform called Digital Ad Expert, which basically does that. And what it allows is not just for us to help build the ecosystems in these regions, because the more people that are trained on the platforms, the more buying and selling there is on these platforms. But at an individual level, what it allows is, it allows people to get upskilled. It allows people to get trained, to find jobs, to start their own businesses, to help their livelihoods. In many ways, it helps sometimes transform lives. And we now have about 600,000 people registered on Digital Ad Expert. We have 10,000 people certified. We are looking to have 100,000 people certified. And some of the stories that have come out of this has been phenomenal. A single mother in Egypt who was unemployed, who took training and is now employed by an agency, right? So that's a way to really democratize access through education. We have a mantra at Aleph that education is a currency that never devalues, so that's what we do. And the second one is SMB. So with SMB, clearly a bedrock of a lot of economies, certainly in the worlds we're in, and we recently launched a product, Aleph Express, that allows simple tools for a lot of these small businesses who have access to technology but might not have the knowledge to do so, to easily partake in this big shift from offline to online and not be left behind. So here we are including all these small businesses to ensure that as the world gets digitized, they can also participate in that.
Mm-hmm. So great journey for small businesses and basically everybody who wants to be upskilled in digital advertising. Now looking further ahead on digital advertising in emerging markets, where do you see it all going in terms of global reach and accessibility? What do you anticipate?
Two things excite me the most. One is access to talent, and one is access to technology. Access to talent, basically, especially in our industry, what the last couple of years has taught you is that you no longer have to be in a particular geography to have a particular job. And if you ask most people in this audience, if you ask them what are some of your big challenges in running their businesses, they will tell you finding good talent. And now there's access to talent in pockets of the world that didn't exist before, right? And it's very easy to then also bring the people into your business, which A, means for businesses they have access to the talent, to pools they didn't have before. Often B, that's much more cost effective. And C, a lot of people talk about diversity and inclusion, but now you can really do something about it. And it's not just a noble thing to do. It's proven that when you bring diverse people and cultures and viewpoints into your business, you achieve better business results. So now you can tap into all these pockets of people all over the world to help you with your businesses here. So A, that access is exciting. And then the second one, and maybe this is a nice place to end, is access to technology, right? And so I think a common theme across this whole conference is, unsurprisingly, AI, Gen AI. And I think there's a huge impact that we'll have in the democratization. I've been in this business now for actually exactly 25 years. My first job was actually launching the office for DoubleClick in Hamburg in 1998. And back then, this conference would have been tiny.
It was still in Düsseldorf, no?
It was in Hamburg. This conference would have been tiny, right? And also the people that had access to internet were tiny. So that was the first big moment. Then 10 years later, you had the iPhone being launched, and that was larger, but it was still a bit exclusive, right? Today, you have this transformative technology being launched where the entire or most of the world now has access to digital, has access to technology. And so I think that generally shifts where a lot of the innovation is going to come from, right? And so what it really excites me the most is that you will see, as a result, because of the resilience and the resourcefulness and the talent and the ambition and the sheer creativity that exists in a lot of those parts of the world, you will see innovation on these platforms coming from places that will really surprise you.
Wonderful. And I particularly love the statement of diversity and business coming together. Thank you a lot for the insights, Rabin.
Thank you very much. Thank you.